All right, it says we're live.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Okay, we'll just kind of chat for a few minutes
Hello.
before starting with the discussion questions so that we'll give everybody a chance to get here. But it looks like there's so many people here already, which is wonderful. Like Noah said, the cool kids show up early.
Yeah, they do.
I think cool on BookTube is very different than cool throughout the rest of the world.
You mean it's cooler than the rest of the world?
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That's what he read.
Oh my goodness. Monique says she hasn't slept in 72 hours.
What?
Whoa. What's going on with
I hope
Monique?
it's because you're reading Way of Kings.
Yeah, hopefully that's not a work thing. Whew.
Oh, that's no fun, though.
Yeah, let's look at these comments here.
The kids who show up early and get the front row desks in class. I was a little bit of a teacher's pet when I was in college, but I still couldn't sit in the front row. It was too much.
Yeah.
Let's see. How far is everybody in the book?
I'm exactly where we're supposed to be. I just stopped
Nice.
right there. I was like, I don't want to accidentally say something that we're not supposed to say.
Yeah.
I just stopped after chapter 17.
I had read 22 chapters before the read-along started, and then I restarted. So,
Okay, so you weren't too much further, but you did just restart the section. Hey, Una.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Una's here?
Yeah.
Hey,
Una is hypoclock already. Una, isn't Thursdays your filming night?
Oh, crap. I thought, yeah.
All right. Okay, so why don't we... Okay, I wanted to let you guys know before we get started that below I have links to all of my wonderful co-hosts right here. This is Victoria and Ryan from Seeking Stories and Michael from Michael Knit. And
Hello.
Victoria, the musical bookworm.
Yes.
And Kristen will hopefully be joining us at some point once
Yay, Kristen.
little
Yay.
kid finally settles down.
Yes. Awesome.
Una said we just finished 2 hours, 7 to 9, and we're done, baby. Nice, Una. You probably got like 10 videos done, knowing you guys.
Alrighty. We just finished. Nice job, Una.
Yeah, Stormalong would definitely not be something that is organized or possible if I were in charge. Christy keeps us all glued together on a schedule. We got a bunch of notes and questions here. I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited about the discussion questions too, guys. I'm sorry that the comment section wasn't visible. Didn't anticipate that. So what I've done is I will have banners with the discussion questions, and we'll choose one of two to do. And if we have extra time at the end, then we will do the extra question. So I guess we can get started on that. Okay, so our first discussion question. Let's see. Oh, and I wanted to say too, Michael and Ryan both have Stormalong playlist videos, so I linked the playlists down below as well, just to make sure y'all know.
I was watching them in anticipation for this live stream, so they're very helpful. I can attest. As a first-time reader, they're a very nice overview, especially that prelude prologue stuff that I had already forgotten about. I was like, oh yeah, I should go watch that video.
Michael did a good job of that.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so here's our first question, and we can decide between this one and the second question. So you guys let me know which one you want to do. So the first one is hooked. So chapter 6, Bridge 4 was the chapter that hooked me initially on my first read through, and that's when I was completely hooked into the story. Where was the place where you guys were completely hooked, or did you get hooked at all? Or if you're not hooked, then that's really sad, and I'm sorry for you. So that's our first question. And then our second question is moral debates, which is something that Brandon Sanderson is really good at, and that's something I love about his writing. He often contrasts character values, and he shows controversies from multiple angles. And he'll like sometimes discuss political things, but because it's from a fantasy or a sci-fi perspective, you know, people don't like get all angry about it as much. So, what controversies have you noticed so far in Stormlight, and which do you anticipate being a big deal? So, you can go by number 1 or 2, or you can tell us hook, which is the label, or morality, which is the other label. So let us know which one you'd like to do. Okay. All right, we've got a morality one. We've got a hook one. Monique was hooked on chapter 3.
Nice. That's early.
Early. Earlier than I was.
I'm maybe biased, but Nicholas has my answer right there. Was hooked at Sason Valet was wear white in the day he was to kill a king.
We've got 2, that's morality. So I can't, it seems like they're both kind of popular.
Yeah.
I was hooked after. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
No, it's like Una says hook. Let's start with the feels.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to start, and then we can start the heavy-hitting thinking later on.
Okay, sounds good.
Michael says, a different Michael says, I didn't get hooked on the first read-through until sometime halfway. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's worse than me.
Oh, we've got so many comments about hooks. That's awesome, guys. Do one of you guys want to share too? My Bridge 4 crew?
Sure. So, unlike Michael, who is hooked like in the first 3 words. No, I'm kidding. I was hooked in the prelude when they were talking about all like the mythology and history, because I've had a feeling that it would play into it somehow. But I really could not get into the story until Kaladin doesn't jump off the honor chasm. At that point, when he decided, okay, I'm ready to actually like take some action in the story, was when I finally bought in for me. I think having the 3 false starts really turned me off from the story, to the point where if it had been like not the hype any other author, I probably would have given up right then and there, which is probably a horrible thing to say on a live stream about Brandon Sanderson and the Way of Kings. But it took like however many 100 and something pages until Kaladin finally decided to get out of his mopey self before like I bought into the story. And now I love it. I think it's great. And looking back at it, having read through the first 17 pages twice now, like Kaladin's story makes a lot more sense. And I can see why Brandon Sanderson had him do the things that he did early on, mainly nothing. But as a first time reader going through that, I'm like, I got to get past this section.
I was actually hooked after Shallan's chapter 5, and it ends on that sentence that reveals like what her true motives are, and that she's trying to actually steal the Soulcaster. And then that was the moment I was like, ooh, intrigue. And I like Shallan's story. It's very mysterious right now to me, and I want to know more. So that was kind of the moment I was like, oh, okay, I'll keep reading.
Yeah, that's a good moment, Victoria, when you realize that, oh, she's actually like, she's trying to steal something. Because like a lot of times, you know, when you're reading a story, kind of, well, at least for me, I like to follow the one who's like gonna do the right thing, or like has a struggle to do the right thing, and so that's always really engaging. Like, but in Shallan's case, the right thing is like a really gray thing, like let her family starve or steal something, you know. So that was a good,
right.
Like moral. That's a moral thing too. What about you, Michael?
So I made the joke that I was in from jump, but there is something to be said for the chapter where Kaladin visits the honor chasm. I was curious if they were going to actually go to Kaladin getting suicidal, because with all of the things that he goes through, in real life, mentally people usually aren't able to handle that kind of stuff. So I was curious because not knowing a lot about the story, but having heard the name Kaladin thrown around so much, I was curious if he would actually get to that point and they would realistically show him struggling with the actual repercussions of having seen the things that he's seen and gone through the things that he's gone through. So when they get there and he is like, this is too much, I'm going to commit suicide, I thought that part was really powerful because I thought that felt real. And then obviously the way that choice pans out with Syl, with the like super naive and beautiful way that she inspires Kaladin to keep trying without even understanding what she's doing. Like, she brings him the poison that he was going to use. Hey, Kristen. Like, it's a really powerful moment of like, she doesn't even know what she's doing, but it's beautiful how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. I love Syl. She's one of my favorites so far. She's so sweet and innocent. And
it's a clever world building technique of Brandon Sanderson, because having Kaladin going through all of that kind of inner turmoil and like just depression right at the beginning, if he didn't have someone to talk to, it would have been just a miserable mess of a beginning. And I've heard that, you know, the Spren have a lot more to do than the story than they let on. So I'm sure there's a whole other side of it that I'm not seeing. But at least strictly from like a character perspective, it gives Kaladin someone to talk to, or else we would spin in his head way too much.
Yeah, she pulls him out of his fun completely. So yeah, she's a very, very obvious device there. Yeah. But I love her character.
You're right, Victor. She's a lot of fun.
All right, this is my friend Amy from the library. Amy is wonderful. I love her.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy. She says we are kind of unhooked. But we did like it when the character said, I think Capsule
says he's going to dance on the table. Yeah.
Dance on the table.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the morals of Dalinar, the morals of the king about that the fighting men are.
Oh, about the brave men.
Yeah, I think it's probably referring to Sadeas there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's a great conversation between Dalinar and Sadeas.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thing was a big argument, but a big moral argument in the story.
I mean, to make a reference, I think, let's see, you would put up there the question about the morality in the series. That is just something that I think will only be more and more interesting to discuss as things move forward.
Yes.
If the idea of gray morality and discussing what's right and wrong for these characters is something that does fascinate you as a reader, looking forward, there's a lot of opportunities that we're going to get to talk about that kind of thing.
Is that some foreshadowing for us, Michael?
Yeah, that's a lot of foreshadowing.
So how do you pronounce Sadeas? I thought it was Sadeas. You say
the audiobook says Sadeas, yeah.
Sadeas, okay.
That's not how I would have pronounced it.
Well,
I was saying it that way, Ryan. I was saying Sadeas, yeah.
Sadeas, yeah.
But then I heard, I think Michael in one of his videos said Sadeas, and I was like, oh.
Well, I try to make up the way I pronounce things. The Chasm Fiend, is that how you pronounce it? The thing?
Yes, yeah, Chasm Fiend.
Kristen told me earlier today that I was pronouncing it wrong because I was reading it so fast that I was reading it Cham's Fiend.
Oh.
But that was my own fault. And it's Shalon, I think, not Shalon, right?
Shalon is how the audiobook says it, yeah.
Shalon, okay.
Yeah, I have the advantage of just having listened to at least like 20% of each of the books with audiobook. So I'm sure there's still a lot of names that I missed, but the main characters, at least that's how Brandon told somebody that they're supposed to.
Well, I guess Brandon knows.
I mean, it's fantasy, right? There's a lot of people talking about different ways to say different names, but like it's all kind of made up anyway.
Yeah. But Rita Reborn said Thaddeus with an S. That makes sense.
And that's the word that I would have, like, that's the name. Thaddeus is the name I think of when you say Sadeas, or is that how to say it? But it's not spelled that way. Like, to me, it throws me because the spelling doesn't match.
Yeah, it is different.
Amy agrees with you, Ryan. Kaladin's disappointment is a big deal.
Jumping off the chasm. And I think if this was a much shorter story, I think that would be your break from Act 1 to Act 2. Kaladin making a choice, saying, okay, now I'm going to do something. I'm stepping out into a world and making my own choices. Even though he's still being, forced into a box in a way, he is taking charge of the story. But again, the story is way longer than that, so I don't even know if you could truly say there's acts in the story.
It's definitely a turning point for sure.
Yes.
For
A turning
Kaladin.
point is a great way to put it.
This comment section is the best.
Syl and Toot Toot would make a great couple. What is Toot Toot from?
What is that from?
I heard somebody else reference Toot Toot this week, and I don't know what it is.
I'm just trying to remember that too. But it sounded funny, so I figured if Leslie said it, it would be funny.
Leslie says Dresden from Dresden Files.
Oh. Okay, I haven't read far enough to have met Toot Toot, I don't think.
I met Toot Toot.
Man, everyone here's read Dresden.
Okay.
Biblioqueer says the audiobook isn't author approved all of the time. I didn't know that. I assumed that the audiobook readers would go to the author to get pronunciations, but I guess that's not always the case.
Yeah. Nicholas says Sanderson said in an old interview that he doesn't like telling people how to pronounce names in his books.
Oh.
That's really interesting. He's the first author I've ever heard say that. I'm sure you all have seen books where there's huge pronunciation guides in the back, exactly how to pronounce each character.
Yep.
I feel like Sanderson is the best example of a modern day author who just loves his fan base so much, almost to a fault. It's you can just pronounce it however you want. I don't care.
I kind of like that.
He's too nice.
Maybe I'll continue to pronounce them how I want to pronounce them.
So I'll keep saying Shams Fiend.
Well, you're going against the spelling there.
Yeah. When you say that's just going against two actual words that have been combined.
That's true.
What we really should do is start pronouncing the Spren's names wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know why he puts those as one word, but they look very weird on the page.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we move on to the next set of questions? So the first option we have is number 1 is hot takes, which is give me your hot take about anything you're dying to talk about. So very general question. Anything in up to through chapter 17. Anything you want to talk about, theorize, whatever. And then the other option we have is favorite quotes. So if you have your book handy, you have your favorite quotes. That could be one to read or type out. I guess the chasm was a big deal for me too, because that was one of my favorite quotes, was when Kaladin comes back from the chasm and he has a talk with Gaz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the comments, 1, 2, or hot takes versus favorite quotes, which you would prefer?
We already have a hot take in the chat.
All right.
The Sprens aren't doing enough for me to create a magic universe feeling, because other than with Cal, they're useless or ignored. Yeah, I actually definitely felt that same way when I was around this point. I mostly found the Spren not distracting, but they're kind of like flavor text almost. Where anytime something is happening, they mention the Spren. And I didn't find it obnoxious, but I also didn't find it was adding a ton of that magic feel to the world as well. That prologue, yes, the prologue part is the one with Zeth, right? That has a lot of the magic there, and then we kind of don't see a lot of the direct magic for a very long time. But I like the way that it's done. But I definitely can understand the Spren don't make it feel magical, fantastical.
Yeah, it's almost like it's too much of it in a way. It's there's a Spren for everything. And again, I've only as far in as you guys are, so I'm sure there's more to it than that. But it's why is there Spren for everything?
Can I say something that might mess everybody up? How many of us watched the Brandon Sanderson like writing classes, like the college classes that he does?
I've seen a bit of it.
He actually, there's one of them, I think it's one of those, where he talks about how he writes these books at this point now, and someone now, like one of his editors, is designated to go through and say, hey, you need to add Spren references here.
Oh, wow.
It's just kind of almost like flavor text at this point.
That's interesting.
It's like part of the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was
No, go ahead.
tapping, so I have
Oh, my
different
word.
color. I know, it's scary. It's frightening, I know. But my
That's
yellow
interesting.
is magic, and I had like a ton of yellow at the beginning, and then as I went on, it's like not nearly as much. So yeah, I definitely felt like, and I think someone else, I don't remember why I saw it, someone else was saying like, where is the magic in this fantasy book? And I'm sure it's just coming. Like we're gonna get more information and a lot more information. So I'm just patiently waiting for that.
Well, I feel like the magic and almost like the mythology might be able to go hand in hand in a way. It's like a lot of things we're hearing about the Knights Radiant and the Heralds, I'm sure have things to do with the magic. And something is history, some is religion, some is mythology, and some of it is true magic, like we saw in the prologue. And I'm sure Michael and Christy are over here just kind of like smiling inside, trying not to say. But I feel like there's like a good cross between all those that we'll find out once the story goes on.
Yeah, because even like the whole use of shard blades and how those work is very mysterious to me right now, and like kind of where that power comes from, you know, how that power was created. It's all very up in the air to me right now. So just keep reading.
I've made this joke before, and I'm only half joking. Does anyone else feel like this book is actually, it has a lot of things in common with a science fiction instead of being about fantasy? Because there's just a lot of technicality, and I think we're going to see that more. There's just a lot of technicality to what's going on.
Actually, a lot of it has reminded me of Dune so far.
Yeah,
I've gotten a very Dune vibe, especially with like the creatures also in the world, and like just the different mentions of creatures, and just like a very desert kind of dry land, and it's giving me very Dune vibes.
And the way that the plants are, the way that the wildlife and the plants react to the high storms. There's a video that I did, and Angela from Literature Science Alliance actually talked about that. Was one of her favorite aspects, was it seemed like the entire world was evolved to deal with the climate that they were in. So the grass goes down when people are near, everything comes out for or hides in the high storms. Everything is a crab or crab-like. Like they basically use crabs as cows in that world.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun.
It's definitely much more of a hard magic system with the rules than you would get in like Narnia or Lord of the Rings or anything like that, especially, which is one of my gripes about the very beginning. The prologue was, and again, I know I'm in the minority with like almost every Sanderson like thing, but I did not like the way that he stopped the prologue action to discuss like how the magic works. Like I understand why he did it to an extent, because he wants the audience to kind of feel like part of the story and get how Zeth is doing these things. But I just didn't love how he like literally like the sword is swinging and then he stops to explain, okay, now this is this kind of binding and this is this kind of lashing.
Yeah, that was a little jarring for me too.
But I'm sure it's important.
Well, I feel like it's maybe that was a little bit like, I kind of had the thought that maybe you see Kaladin powerful before you see him depressed, so that you kind of have a hook for paying attention to that in the future. Maybe because there's such a long drought of seeing any magic, he wanted you to be like, hey, there is magic here.
That's a really good point.
But you won't see it for a little bit. It's okay. It'll be back.
Nice. I mean, it's fascinating magic systems, though. The whole gravitational thing that you described in your video this week, Michael, is, I mean, Sanderson, I think, is second to none at this point with fantasy, modern fantasy anyway, when it comes to magic systems. I mean, like, this system is so different than, like, the Mistborn system. But just the fact that they came from the same person's mind is incredible. And the fact they both make sense within those respective worlds.
That's
Actually, can I say something about that real quick?
Yeah.
when I initially started reading it, I messaged Christy like, "Hey, I think I see Mistborn crossover," and I still don't know if I'm right or not, to be honest. But-
Theories.
But especially with Seth, just the way he can manipulate objects and gravity and like pull and push against things, it made me think a lot of Mistborn. So I was like, maybe there's something there. And also Syl being like a misty creature made me think.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I could be totally wrong. I don't know.
Someone agrees with you in the comments, Victoria.
Oh yay!
That the lashing yourself around the room had hardcore Mistborn vibes.
Yeah, right.
Which I totally agree with. Like when I first read that, I was like, "Which book am I reading?"
Okay, so maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
Faith mentioned something that I've seen a lot, which is that Kaladin reminds her of Kelsier, who I haven't read that, but I've seen that so many different places that makes me think I might like Kelsier.
And that was my struggle with Kelsier. I started reading Way of Kings literally like the day after I finished reading the first Mistborn book, and Kelsier is like one of the best characters I've read in a long time, and he's such an active character. And coming from Kelsier to Kaladin was like a slap in the face in a way.
Yeah, at least at the beginning, they're very different characters. Yeah.
This book, because of the way that they have women be readers and the men be non-readers, is maybe the first example, because I always look for this for some reason. It's something I've been trying to find. It's an example of a book where the readers are not inherently like the best characters in the story. Because that seems to be a common it's like a fan servicey thing. If you're reading a book, the person who reads in the book is the best. But in this book, it just seems like dudes can't read, or they're not supposed to read.
Well, it's almost because in the conversation, I hope I'm in the right part of the book because I read a little bit ahead. I don't think I'm ahead of what we're talking about, but I hope I'm not. But the conversation that Dallin, or who is he having the conversation with? His son, I think, about how his brother's last words. And it's that, and what's his son's name? Starts with an A.
Adeline.
Yeah, he has that thought about like how, like, if his uncle was able to read and write, like, I think he calls it does he call it a shameful secret? It's like it's almost.
I think so. Yeah.
Shame. It's not just that, like, oh yeah, guys don't read, but it's like embarrassing almost.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's considered a feminine thing. So yeah.
I found that really interesting. I was like, okay,
yeah.
There was a couple different mentions of the safe hand thing, which Brandon always talks about that being very interesting, like what different cultures consider taboo and not.
Yeah. Well, it's
but
like
also, it makes for some very funny memes about Stormlight and safe hands.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, it's like, it kind of reminds me of back in past centuries when like seeing a woman's ankle was like, you know,
scandalous.
Yeah, scandalous. That's the word. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next questions. So the first one we have is plot predictions. What are the main plots or character arcs or mysteries that we see in these first 17 chapters that are going to be important later that you would predict? So this is like mostly big picture stuff. And then if you'd rather talk about the smaller stuff, that's also an option. So plot and then theories would be the other option. I want theories about other things like Spren or the epigrams at the beginning of the chapter, which are like excerpts from who knows where. And, religions or cultural assumptions, potential conflicts. So one plot predictions, two theories, whichever you would prefer to do.
Yeah, this is where it gets really fun.
Yeah, I want to see people who are reading. I want to see people who are reading this for the first time give some fun predictions, theories.
Yeah. Danny, Kristen said that she feels the exact same way.
That's how Christy, when I first read your questions earlier today, or at least the first draft, I told Ryan, I said, so this is how I feel in like literature class. I can't answer any of these.
Bye, Una.
Bye, Bye,
I
Una.
feel like I could answer them, but I'm probably wrong, so I'm afraid to answer them.
No. It's so much more fun because especially if you predict something that's going to get proven wrong in like 2 chapters, it's going to be so funny.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be mean. It is just it does make for interesting content though.
Yeah.
Bye,
Well,
Noah.
Right.
I definitely think, I mean, this is probably maybe an obvious one to everyone else, but like the Shattered Plains, I'm assuming they became shattered in the grand cataclysmic event that also affects the other books, like Elantris and Mistborn. Like the Cosmere has this big event, and so I'm assuming that the Shattered Plains were part of that, and that at one point they weren't shattered, and now they are.
That's interesting because Kaladin says that at one point. He's like, this was, what did he say? I forget now. I'm going to have to look up exactly what he says. But he mentions that.
Yeah.
Raj asked a question for thoughts on Vorinism. I want to talk about Vorinism really bad, and I think that the next chapter, the one after the one that we ended on today, there's actually some more about Vorinism talked about, and I want to make a video on it.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
Because we haven't got to
excited
see
for
a
that.
lot of it.
Yeah. So I have 2 theories.
Do it.
Yeah.
So the first comes from chapter 16, Cocoons. So right before we stopped, and that's one of Kaladin's flashbacks. That's when he is talking with Laryl and Jost. Basically, like the Jost is the I guess the lower non of the culture.
Mhm.
And there's 2 mentions. Is that a word? Mentions of winning a shard blade. And quote, even a italics slave can become a light eyes if you win a shard blade. And my thought, my prediction is that Kaladin is going to win a shard blade somehow. Knowing Kaladin, someone will probably take it from him, and he won't get to keep it. But I think so much has been made about a big deal about how like the Dark Eyes can't have swords, and Kaladin's a Dark Eyes, and he's like an amazing fighter and all that. And I feel like Sanderson wouldn't have made a comment about winning a shard blade twice in the same chapter about Kaladin when he's young if that wasn't going to pay off at some point in the story.
I think you're right. And then to add on to that too, at the very end, I think of chapter 17, Gaz makes a comment to Kaladin about how he sucked out like the Stormlight.
Yep.
They're Dun spheres now. I think is how you say that, or Dune spheres. And that he's like, well, what did you do with like where did the Stormlight go? They were like fully charged this morning. And then he's like, I don't know. So I think Kaladin has some kind of like powers that are, you know, we're gonna find out more about them, and that he has abilities that he doesn't know he has.
Exactly.
So I think that's gonna play into that.
In that same chapter, Victoria, on page 267 on like the bigger copy of the book, it says as they're charging, it says Kaladin felt a jolt of energy, a surge of sudden strength, unanticipated and unexplained. And it made me think exactly what you're thinking, kind of back to even back to Zeth at the very beginning when he's like leaking shard light after he breathes it in. Like somehow Kaladin is consuming the stormlight and using it.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
100%
with you. I'm with you, Ryan.
with you too, Victoria. And of course, Michael and Christy know the
I'm
answer.
like, I'm not gonna say anything.
Don't look at that side of the screen.
I like this theory from Reader Reborn. I think that's Jack. That's you, right, Jack?
Kaladin opens an ice cream shop.
Something about Kaladin opening an ice cream shop is way more compelling to me than it probably should be. Like, I want that so bad now.
Kaladin's cones? Anyone?
Yeah, man.
Yes.
Skeleton's cones.
I don't know why that sounds so interesting, but it does. I have fan fiction to write after this.
do it. And then down there can open up a shop right across called like Duncan Dalinar or something like that.
Duncan Dalinar.
What's the word, or sorry, the term for when an author or somebody in a movie introduces something? It has something to do with a gun. Like if you show a gun, the gun has to go off, or
Yeah.
it's about, what is that called?
It's called different things by different people. A lot of people call it the smoking gun. Some people call it like the X Factor.
Okay.
Depends on who you talk to.
There are a lot of things on a reread of this book that I think is astounding, because there are things that are kind of hinted at this book that don't happen until books 2 and 3, and probably, if I were to guess, like probably further into the series as well, in a way that I find incredibly impressive, considering these books are coming out a decent amount of time apart and they're so big, and like the amount of foreshadowing that is so far in the future. And I'm not even referencing things that you guys have mentioned, like things that I have seen that I know that they don't even seem that important, but they somehow tie into something in the future. It's just incredible how well this was plotted out before he even published this first book.
Right. Oh, to answer your question, Rita Reborn and Nate's bookish thoughts said Chekhov's gun. That's what it's called.
Okay, that's what I've heard it called. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's the one I've heard too.
Yeah. Well, and I only know this because I've read a little bit up on Sanderson's Cosmere a little bit, but in the very first interlude, there's almost like a throwaway line with a random name. I don't want to say the name just because I don't know if it's spoilery for the rest of the series or not. But like that apparently has a really big deal to do about the rest of the Cosmere as a whole.
Well, you could say, I mean, the name is in the interlude, right?
That's true. Like the Hoid, Hoid.
Yep. I feel like that's a name. Yeah, that's a name that people might recognize.
Yeah. Speaking of like foreshadowing for the expanded like Cosmere as a whole in like the whole series, so there's going to be a gap between book 5 and 6 in the Stormlight Archive of several years, and I always thought I heard that it's supposed to be like several hundred years, but then Brandon Sanderson did like a live stream for, was it like TWORCon last week or something like that, and he said 10 years, but I don't know if that was just like an accident. Like I feel like
no, I think that's the actual plan, because I've now seen it in more than one location.
Okay.
I thought I had the same thought that you did, Ryan, but then I've now seen in multiple locations that it's only going to be like a 10-15 year gap between 5 and 6.
Interesting.
That's a good question, Biblioqueer. That's a good question.
That is a very good question.
Yeah. It is. He says, does this world have some mind erasure magics? That's my question too.
Yeah, the mention before about something being weird with Dalinar thinking about his wife. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah. So here, this is based on the State of the Sanderson. The State of the Sanderson is a newsletter that's as long as Way of Kings that Brandon Sanderson puts out at the end of every year. And he gives a list, like a chronology of all the different books in the Cosmere, which ones are published, and kind of like what order they come in. And it's interesting because Mistborn, the first trilogy, comes first after Elantris, and then the first 5 Stormlight, and then Mistborn era 2, and then Warbreaker, and then Mistborn era 3, and then Stormlight 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Which is interesting that he has Mistborn era 2 and 3 in between Stormlight.
Yeah, that is strange.
5 and 6. Maybe there's something to do with time in the Cosmere somehow. I don't know. Sorry, I know I'm totally off on a tangent now. It's just been bugging me for days.
Maybe this is also a tangent, but I want to bring it up because it's come up multiple times in the chat, and I just want to kind of get everybody's feel for it. How do we feel about the non-Balat interlude?
Oh, man.
Because I might have a controversial opinion about that one.
Do it.
Oh, really? Give it.
So the non-Balat interlude, so we know very, very little about Shallan's family at this point of the story, but we do know that their dad was not a good dude, and there's like strong emphasis that he was at least abusive to the brothers in the family. And so while non-Balat's fascination with like torturing these small animals is like inherently like disgusting, and it like makes you cringe and it feels terrible, it does feel like, to me, based on what I've read, an accurate portrayal of like a serious mental inability to process things, or like coping mechanism for someone that has faced serious trauma in their life, and some way of trying to like deal with that while trying to like cope and live a normal life while struggling with something deeper inside of them. And so like when I'm reading that chapter, I'm like, whoa, that's another one of those gray areas, because like normally in a story, if this is the person who's doing these things, they are just inherently this monster. But you don't really get that impression from the rest of the conversations that happen.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, this is an interesting thing to read about, because it's really messed up, and it's rough to read, but it feels like realistic in a way that I thought was really well done from my perspective.
Well, it makes you wonder, because there's that, is it the oldest son who disappeared, I think? Or is like declared dead, but I guess has vanished, I think.
Oh, yeah. The older son died somehow.
Yeah.
I don't remember now. Ooh.
Died or vanished. I think he was declared dead, but I'm wondering if like he was just so dishonored that he was declared dead and he shows up somewhere else, like on Bridge 4 or something like that. I don't know. Just a random theory. But on that note, last theory.
We love theories, Ryan.
Does anyone think, okay, so Shallan's father had a soul caster that he wasn't supposed to have, and no one knows how he got it. In Interlude 3, Szeth basically says that he took the soul caster that he took from Gavilar and hid it in, was it Jakavad? Is that the name of it?
In the audiobook, it says Yakaved.
Yakaved. So hid it in Yakaved, which is where Shallan is from. So my thought is maybe the soul caster that Shallan's father had was the one that Szeth took from Gavilar, and then Shallan's fathers happened to find it. That's my theory.
What's the general consensus on Szeth in the chat and in the panel?
About what? Sorry, I missed it.
Szeth, the character Szeth.
I think he's fascinating.
He's super religious, and right now I don't quite understand the religion itself, but I know that I think all of his motives are religious, or at least it seems that way so far. So I'm sure we'll learn more.
Somebody mentioned anime in the chat, so I don't know if this is going to play well, but if anyone else, now I'm having a hard time remembering the name, but in the Full Metal Alchemist anime/manga, there is a character, and I cannot remember his name, but he goes around and he is extremely like Szeth. So when I found out that Brandon Sanderson had not watched or read Full Metal Alchemist, I was incredibly surprised, because I thought that character was super, super inspired by a similar character in that world, but it wasn't the case. Scar, that's it. Thank you. Nath's Bookish Thoughts. Scar is his name.
Nice.
Yeah, I felt very Scar vibes from Szeth.
Is Szeth's backstory explored yet in any of the books that are already out, or is that still to come?
Not deeply.
Okay.
To some degree, but it's one of those things where it's like you kind of have to theory craft it instead of fully. It's not so much like a Kaladin style. What do you guys think about the Kaladin flashbacks, everybody here?
Well, I like Leslie's theory right here. Kaladin is Talonel. I buy it.
That was an interesting one.
I think the flashbacks are really helpful to just paint a better picture of Kaladin and how he got to where he is. I'm especially interested on how he went from liking Light Eyes and actually like wanting to be a Light Eyes to hating Light Eyes now. So I'm very interested in that story thread.
Yeah. Here's something interesting about Light Eyes, and I apologize. My mind always goes to movie making because that's my background. But so in the book, you see, Light Eyes, they can have, blue eyes or yellow eyes or gray eyes, just these weird color eyes. And we buy it as an audience, as a reader, and then almost forget about it. I don't know if I'd be able to like watch a whole movie with someone with yellow eyes. Like I would think like Darth Maul the whole time.
Maybe kind
That's
of.
probably in other things have that, don't they? Like I haven't seen The Witcher, but in The Witcher doesn't Geralt or whatever his name is have yellow eyes?
For him too.
Okay. I feel like in fantasy adaptations, there's probably more examples. Yeah. Angela says it works for Geralt. Is it Geralt? I don't know the way to pronounce it. But like, I feel like that in my brain, that strikes me as something that happens more. And maybe that's because I'm watching Twilight, because I'm pretty sure in Twilight, he's wearing colored contacts the whole time.
Yeah.
Not that works but
No, I guess you just buy it. It's almost like, elves with pointy ears and hobbits with big feet. After a while, just you accept it.
Well, Bethan mentions Dune for the eyes as well, and that's the second Dune reference that we've had here tonight. Yeah. In Dune, in Dune they do have different colored eyes. I had forgotten that.
So I guess when Dune comes out in December, we'll be able to watch that movie and see if it works or not on the big screen. Colored eyes, anyway. Different colored eyes.
Faith says that the Soulcaster reminded her of Thanos and the Infinity Stones. I couldn't picture one of those in my head because when I first listened to that, I was doing the audiobook and I couldn't picture. I think there's actually a literal drawn picture in the book, but I had a hard time imagining what that looked like. I slipped Twilight.
Yes,
I've been accidentally doing that a lot.
All right, guys, let's do a different question.
Sounds good.
All right, so the first question option we have is quirky details. This is possibly my favorite thing about, not maybe, it's one of my very favorite things about what Sanderson does. He has a really epic scope, but really detailed with these quirky things, like how like the Thalens have eyebrows grown all the way out and tucked behind their ears, and how like the grass goes into the ground to protect itself and then comes back out when the danger's gone. So if you want to give some quirky details, I'd love to hear them. And the other option we have is, and you know what, you guys can just give out whatever you want, 1 and 2, and we can figure it out. Just answer whichever one you feel like. Swearing is the other one. I always pay attention to this because I don't like a ton of swearing in my books, but I love how Brandon Sanderson handles it because people do swear, and the way he does it is really funny.
Yeah.
And the expression, storming is one of the swears, and that's what inspired the name of this read along. So Stormwong. So if you have funny swears that you have run across, I would love to hear them.
I like to storm you when they storm you.
Yeah.
Storm you, storm it is a good one.
Yeah.
Doesn't someone say Stormfather at some point?
Yeah, Stormfather. Okay, I want to bring this up. Maybe this is just me being a little bit picky as a religious person. And I've noticed this in more than one Brandon Sanderson book. It seems weird to me, and obviously every world is going to develop their language differently, and swearing is going to be different in every language. But it does seem weird to me that even religious characters in Sanderson novels will use their deity's name in their swearing, as opposed to like using some sort of euphemism like most religious people do in our world, where like people that are like in the Vorin culture in that world will still say swears related to their deity's names, where in real life that is not usually okay, at least in Christianity and I probably other religions as well. You don't usually use your own deity as part of an oath.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
In the first interlude, they're not even allowed to say the name of their god, unless they're in a protected area, because it makes the other brother jealous.
That part is crazy. That part is awesome.
I love that.
That's funny.
He's like, I have to pretend not to like really follow this god because the the god's brother will get mad, so I have to pretend to worship the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
That was hilarious.
There was something I was going to
Blood
mention.
Matches, that's a good one.
The illustrations are awesome. The bookish mom. I totally agree.
Those illustrations are canon, so I often use them to argue with my friends who've only listened to the audiobook to tell them that they're wrong about how something looks, because I consider them canon if they're in the book. Blood and ashes, yeah.
Yeah.
All of my euphemisms in my brain are from Wheel of Time or different like freaking Sanderson novels.
Yeah.
Warbreaker has a lot of them too.
Rich Freeman said, I wanted to say, quote, burn you, but then I realized I'm mixing up series. That's Eye of the World, right? Or Wheel of Time?
Yeah, I think they say
yes.
burn it there.
Yeah, burn you. It's always burn something with that.
Angela says she loves the interludes. How do you guys like the interludes?
Me too.
I was very confused by them at first. They confused me, but the only one that made sense to me was non-Balat.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two, I was like, who are these people? Why is this important?
Yeah. I promise I'm not just trying to like have a different opinion. I don't like interludes. Again, it comes from the filmmaking background. We try to tell the best story possible in the shortest time frame possible. And the interludes, they're cool for me, but they're like, okay, like if this was a movie, this would be the first thing to get cut out of the script.
Yeah, I don't think that's that uncommon. I do know a decent number of people more recently after listening to them talk about the books that think the interludes are just. It's one of those things where you're reading giant books, and I think that there are aspects of the interludes that tie into things later on, or they're like extra world building details, or in some of these instances, they have the references to the other greater Cosmere stuff. But yeah, I don't think that's a super uncommon opinion.
Well, I feel like as like a fan of the Cosmere, like I'm hoping to become a huge fan of Sanderson's works. I like this, but I feel like going back and like reading it over again once most of the books are out, it'll be super fun, like you were saying, Michael, to see those kind of crossovers. And I feel like he does it for the fans, so they have something to like look forward to and make theories about and guess, just as a story structure element. And on that note, Sanderson does say that writing a Stormlight book, he treats it like writing 3 different books and then kind of puts them all together. So I guess the interludes really are like kind of separations between books 1, 2, and 3 of a Stormlight book.
Brandon always talks about how he doesn't think that he's very good at writing short stories, but that's really what they are, those interludes.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, look, one of his short story examples was like Edge Dancer, which is basically a full-length book.
I agree with Beth Ann, who says the interludes make you realize the world is higher than just the shattered plane. So yeah, they expand the world, and in that way, I can appreciate what their purpose is there. But just that's like really in the moment of reading them, I'm like, okay, who is this person? Where am I now? You know, but I'm sure like looking back, it'll be, oh, cool. That's right. We go and see this part of the world, you know.
Right.
That's definitely an Easter egg for a rereader.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I want to hear your new opinion.
Because Sanderson's a foreshadower. Like, that's what he does. So I feel like each of the interludes, he writes them for a purpose. It's not just like throwing a scene from another part of the world just because, oh, it's cool to see that part of the world. And even though I'm sure that's part of it, like he has a reason for putting it there, even though I don't know why. And, you know, a lot of us who are at this point don't know why. But it's clear he's dropping hints about stuff.
Yeah.
I see you, Angela.
A detail that I really like is the 10 heartbeats before they can get the shard blade. I think that's really like raises the stakes, because like 10 heartbeats when you're in the middle of a battle is such a long time. And like how terrifying would that be? You know, just like waiting for your weapon to materialize.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really fun detail.
Yeah.
Speaking of little details, I like that one, and I also just always think that it's super cool, because maybe it's just because I like fantasy and magic stuff. I think it's super cool when you can have your weapon materialize out of nowhere. It's just like one of those like, oh, yeah, I'm in for that.
And then how they like disappear into
if they get attacked or they drop it or whatever, it'll disappear.
Yeah, Mist. What's Branson with Mist? Mist here, Mist and Mistborn. Mist for Spren, like I think you were saying, Victoria. It's like it's all over the place.
Yeah,
very
Angela. Angela mentions my thoughts on the interludes, which is even if they didn't tie into the rest of the story, which I think most of them do, I enjoy being able to say, like, you are in this giant world, you are super focused on this spot. It's really cool to see other aspects of the world. Just because when I pick up his books, I think I've learned, and maybe it's just a preference taste. It has to be a preference taste thing. I've just accepted that, I just kind of want to read a history book sometimes. Instead, like, I'm okay with it not always being the most action heavy or the most. I think I'm just more okay with exposition, I guess.
Yeah. And I think to kind of go off that, Michael, we had the epic, massive world building of Lord of the Rings, and that kind of set the standard in the 50s. And then he had so many writers try to replicate that world building at the expense of storytelling a lot of times. So I feel like for people who've read like a lot of like fantasy over the last 20 years, it's almost like one of those things where it's like, how is this world building gonna really play out in conjunction with the rest of the story and with the characters? Are the characters going to be as strong as the world building, or is it just going to be a lot of, cool lands and swords at the expense of storytelling? So I feel like that's why some people, including myself, are a little bit more wary of it, because we've seen it gone wrong so many times. But now that I'm into it, I totally agree with you. Like, it's epic.
For those people that are either on the fence or maybe they're into it already, I'm curious at this point, because I'm in a similar way. Normally, I like plot-driven books more than character-driven books, just depending on how heavy the balance is on one side or another. But for the chapters that we're in, at the points that we're in, the people that are super into this book, I'm curious if you could even try to summarize what the main plot of this book is, because I feel like it's extremely hard to do, because it's really only character focused. Like, a lot of people talk about how Brandon Sanderson's plots are extremely good, but sometimes his character development is not always the best. I have seen that on some forums now that I've explored. But really, if you like at least The Way of Kings, I think there's so little plot that you can really explain through most of it, that if you do like it, it's like, I guess I do like some character-driven stories, because that's pretty much all this one is. It's multiple character studies.
Pink is characters. Look at all that pink. There's a lot of pink. I ran out of pink a couple times. Had to get more.
And that's a really good point, though, about kind of that discrepancy. A few of my family members have asked, so what's this book about that you're like a third of the way through? I'm like,
yeah, I don't know. And anything I feel like I might say feels too spoilery, because in the book, it takes hundreds of pages to get to the plot points, but there's so many character developments along the way. And I think that's why when bigger plot elements do happen later on in the series, you are just so attached to the characters that you're attached even if you don't know what's going on, if that makes any sense.
It does. And here's the thing that I've always said before. Character matters so much, to the point where, like, for those of us who like watch the Marvel Cinematic movies over the last 10 years or so, people are just so in love with like Captain America and Iron Man and Tony Stark, their relationship there, to the point where if a movie were to come out right now that would be like Steve Rogers and Tony Stark Great British Bake Off, people would spend tons of dollars watching it, because they want to see those characters interact in just a fun way. I'm joking, but at the same time, it's like, you have to buy into those characters. And then when you do, you can take them on any old story you want. It doesn't matter to an extent. I mean, you still have to kind of stay within the bounds of the plot you created and within the world you created, within those rules. But as long as you stay inside that, if we care about the characters, we're along for the ride. It doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
Are you saying it might be interesting if we saw Calvin open an ice cream shop?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's probably why it intrigued you so much. You want to know what he would do.
Oh, man.
You should just tweet that to Brandon Sanderson every day now until he writes it in somehow.
He'll see it eventually.
That's the next interlude.
That'll be in the second cycle of books.
Ooh, Roshar
follows Paladin.
See, Angela now expanded it to Roshar ice cream and like how that would work, and that just fascinates me, especially the people that live in these desert climates. Like, ice is probably a big deal for those people, right? Like, the preservation of colder things.
So this detail is not in the book text per se, but it's something that Ryan pointed out to me like before we started reading it, and that's the map in the back, like the upside down version almost of
It's like here
Rorschach.
is the normal version of the map. Oops,
I don't know if it's in everyone's book, but
hang on.
yeah, that one.
Wait, that is upside down.
Mhm.
So that's normal.
And then the other one, I'm just really intrigued. I think
like
it's really cool.
Inverted.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Biblia
It says
that it's all one
it says Shadesmar, which is probably something that you may not be aware of.
It's literally an inversion. It's like it's like his own version of the upside down.
You may want to look out for the word Shadesmar in some upcoming chapters.
Yeah.
So many theories.
Whoa.
I actually did not notice that was there. That's awesome that you guys pointed that out.
Thank you, Ryan. That is that's
Can
really
I just be
cool.
honest for a second?
Yes.
No, never.
So Brandon Sanderson said that there's going to be roughly 36 books in the Cosmere, and he's written 11. He said right now that he's on pace to finish when he's 74. Like, should we be concerned?
Yeah,
Yes, we should.
absolutely, we should be concerned. Especially if he keeps starting things like Skyward. No
Well,
offense to Skyward, I
know,
like
right?
those books.
He did say in his in December, in his last State of the Sanderson, that he's realized now that he's like time is of the essence, and he's gonna stop working on or he's gonna limit non-Cosmere projects as much as possible.
An ice cream maker Fabrial, absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Rich. That's how they would do it. That totally makes sense. Crab flavor, ooh, interesting. A little savory, a little sweet. Some Pinko-Mite ice cream, nasty.
Calvin Creamery. There we go. That's a good one.
Do we want to do one question or do
Sure.
No,
Yeah,
no.
let's do it.
Well, I guess I should let the people that are like waiting on dinner make that decision.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, one more question is good.
One more question.
I forget that we're all over the country right now.
All right, we'll do one more then, and then you guys can go eat your dinner. So, the first option, or you can just always just share your opinion on both of them if you want. Fantasy tropes. Now, I think Sanderson probably reads a ton of fantasy, so he knows all of them. So a lot of times when he's giving us fantasy tropes, there's an inversion somewhere in there. Or he just does them really well. You know, they're never stale, in my opinion. So he always complicates the black and white morality thing, which is something that, you know, since the beginning with Tolkien, you know, the orcs and Sauron versus everybody else kind of a thing. So what fantasy tropes have you spotted so far in the Stormlight Archives and inversions? And if you come up with a trope, do please label it trope so we know what it is. And then the other option is leadership styles in this book. Leadership is always a big theme in Sanderson's books, which you know if you've read Mistborn, the trilogy. And so what leadership styles did you recognize and appreciate or not so far? And just label that leadership. So we can just talk about both of them if you guys want.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, Kaladin is obviously an amazing leader, and you can see that in how he interacts with the bridgemen and how he tries to pull them out of their depression and just get them like having something to live for. So definitely they're building Kaladin up to be an amazing leader, and I'm sure he's going to be leading bigger things and more people, I would assume. And then Gaz is a horrible leader, and I did not like him at all.
Yes.
I like what Rich. Yeah, that one.
What?
Where Rich says that's a good point.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a very epic scope kind of trope that we've seen before. That's one thing I love about science fiction and fantasy is there's often like multiple like cataclysms and civilizations behind the one that we are currently reading about.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the big tropes that a lot of fantasy authors try to stay away from now because it's been beaten over the head so many times as like the kid or the farm boy who doesn't know anything and he's destined for something greater and goes on a mythic quest, which is actually satirized in an epic book called Kill the Farm Boy, if anyone hasn't read it. Two authors, they take like every fantasy trope you've ever heard of.
It's hilarious.
And makes fun of it in the novel form. Highly recommend it. But I like to go to your question, Christy. I think Sanderson twists that trope for Kaladin in the sense that when we finally get through all the false starts and meet him properly, even though he kind of meets the age of like a Luke Skywalker type of character, he has we know he's had medical training, we know he's fought in a war, we know he's been a slave for about a year or so, he's seen a lot and done a lot. So even though he still has to start out on an epic journey, he's not this green untried character at all. He's someone who's, even though he's young, he has life experience. And you just don't see that a lot with.
He has soldier leadership experience by that point, even.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned in that prologue, showing his leadership in that prologue, it's chapter 1. I get very confused with the false starts. In chapter 1, you actually get to see him start at a point where he's already very competent in a lot of different aspects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Leslie, this is a really good point. He really cared about his whole crew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note too, that's why I feel like Dalinar is such a great character, because you have again a character who isn't green. He is what's his name? His nickname? It's like the Black something.
The Blackthorn.
Blackthorn. Yeah, like that he has this like epic history to him. It's like almost like putting Aragorn in the middle of a story, like as Aragorn is aging in a way. We get to see a character who's again not brand new. I think it was Rajathon just said Shallan is our green character. So we do have that perspective there, and I'm sure she's much deeper than we're seeing, but she's the untried person. Whereas, Dalinar and Kaladin are to two different extents, almost on two different ends of the warfare leadership spectrum, are people who have seen and done things.
Shallan is such an interesting character because on some levels she's so green, but when she works on the aspect of getting taken into her wardship, she talks about how she basically had to teach herself everything that she knows, and she is extremely competent in so many things while still being extremely naive in the ways of the world that allow us to get a bunch of world building and aspects there, but also it makes her and you had that experience in your micro 100-page reviews that you talked about, Ryan. It makes her the character that you can relate to because you have more in common with her mindset going in.
Right, which is why for me I know unpopular opinion, but I did not like Kaladin from the beginning because I couldn't understand where he was coming from, why he was doing what he was doing, and what his desire was. And even though Shallan, that part of the book you have to suffer through a lot of exposition, at least you know pretty quickly that she is here to find a way to save her family, and really no one believes she can do it. So there's that instant connection, even if it's more boring than the Kaladin section, at least in the first 100 pages.
Bibliocare brings up some really interesting points with Kaladin's skills seeming to come from nowhere. At the position that you're in, at least in the story, it does seem kind of like in the flashbacks he's a naive kid who is learning medicine, and in the future he seems to be extremely talented for battle. I don't want to say too much about it, but that is a very valid criticism of what you've read in the story so far. Though I think, what is it? How long before chapter 1 is the earliest flashback? How far does it go back?
The first flashback about Kaladin?
Yeah.
9 years?
7?
Okay. I thought it was pretty significant.
One of them, the one I remember reading, was 7.5 years.
And then there was one where he was 10 years old.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I imagine that something we don't know yet has happened in that time to turn him into the person he is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and there's
the explanation.
Sanderson does something that I find really interesting in a lot of the flashback characters. It's not really a spoiler, I think, to say that there's a different flashback character in each of the books, and he's even forecasted for the rest of the series what books are going to have what characters' flashbacks, and he's indicated that the character does not need to live to that book for the flashbacks to be about that character.
Oh.
Which is it's like a little bit of theory crafting there. But the interesting thing that he does, and it's kind of an interesting concept anytime you choose to do a prequel almost of any sorts, is there are so many things you already know about where the character is going to be because you've seen him in the future. So a lot of the suspense, there is some mystery to what happened, to why he got the way he is, but there's so many things you already know, and you're just curious how it's going to happen. Like, how many times is Kaladin's brother mentioned in the future, so you know exactly what's coming.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those details that you get through along the way, and it's not just like foreshadowing that you think you're going to miss. There's so many things you know are going to happen. You know he's going to become a soldier. You know something's going to happen with his brother. Like, you know all of these things are going to happen, but you still go back, and the mystery is figuring out why or how that got to where it got.
Right.
Which I don't think that always works for prequel movies, and that's why, especially with Kaladin's arc, even in my first read through, those flashbacks, they were a mixed bag for me. Because you already knew where everything was going. And so going back and forth sometimes was rewarding and sometimes felt like it was is the mighty duck. Quack, quack, quack.
Yes. And it's interesting, like what you were saying, Michael, because we already know that his younger brother dies. It said over and over again. It's like we're almost beat over the head with it. And it's like normally that's an element that an author would save and like pull out of his bag, like at the perfect point to like give us all the feels. But Sanderson chooses to let us know that almost from the beginning, which is very interesting.
He does that with a lot of different flashbacks in all of the books, really. But there are so many. There are always big things that are going to be surprising. Like there's always a huge payoff for the flashback sequences, but there's also like so much of it you do already know. And I feel like Kaladin in Way of Kings is actually the probably worst example of it, where the flashback characters in the other two books, I feel like you're getting much more new information without having every single thing spelled out for you.
Right. Oh, someone in the comments, I just missed who it was, I'm trying to find it, said that Words of Radiance flashbacks are Shallan.
Yeah, that's true.
Who's the flashback character in Oathbringer?
Dalinar.
Okay. Man, I have to wait 2 books to find out about Dalinar.
Oh man, though, it's worth it.
I believe it. So does that
Dalinar
mean we're getting... Sorry, go ahead, Victoria.
Sorry. Dalinar to me is definitely one of the most interesting characters because I feel like we're going to get a lot of like morality questions with Dalinar and like see him struggle with war, but also having like these really strong morals and the code that he adheres to. I'm very interested in Dalinar at this point.
Well, we'll probably get a lot more about Gavilar at the same time too, which will be interesting. I have a question once we're done with this part.
Yeah, go for it.
But so at the very back of the book, it says, this has been bugging me since the very beginning. I know we're not going to find out this until who knows when, maybe book 10. But it says there are 4 whom we watched, and then he explains the 4 in the back of the book. And then it says these 4 people are key. I'm assuming relating to Shallan, Kaladin, Dalinar, and Szeth. One of them may redeem us, and one of them will destroy us.
I was just reading that yesterday. Yeah.
It's interesting going through the book knowing that like someone is going to like, and I'm sure we can interpret destroy very loosely in Sanderson's terms. But what does that mean, and which character do we think this is?
Ooh.
Yes. I kind of think Szeth maybe is the destroyer. Maybe. Because he has this religious like theme to him, and which I don't know very much about right now. But I just feel like Szeth is a very obviously extreme character, and he has very specific viewpoints. And it also seems he's a tool that other people can use, right? Because he has a weapon. He has to do what other people say for some reason that I don't know yet. But
he's kind of like Darth Maul in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very much an assassin kind of character. So that would be my theory, is that Szeth would be that person to destroy.
It's crazy.
but I could be totally wrong. It might be Shalon. I don't know.
It could be any of them.
Yeah.
This is the hardest I've had at not talking about stuff, is this particular conversation. And I think part of it is because it's not 100% answered yet. Like, I feel like that's still a place where you could do a lot of theory crafting, and I could come up with a lot of ideas, but they would be pretty spoilery.
Yeah. Now we could go all the way back to Leslie's prediction right from the beginning that Kaladin is Talonel. Maybe that's. Ooh, whatever one you just had, Chrissy, it just vanished. I think it said that it could be the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was it?
Ooh.
Could be the same one.
Do you guys have a favorite character so far?
I just wanted to say real quick, Biblioqueer, you have so many good ideas. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know. Yes, I have been reading them. They're very good ideas. Good
You
prediction.
people, including Ryan and Kristen and Victoria, that are reading this book for the first time are way better at coming up with theories and recognizing foreshadowing than I was.
But we also have to remember too that like we're reading it for a read along too, so like we're looking for things.
That's
Yeah.
partially true, and maybe the pace is helping a little bit if you're reading it slower.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mhm. I would skip a lot of things if I hadn't have also had like Michael your breakdown videos and like Ryan your micro breakdown videos. I think I would have skipped a lot of things, especially at the beginning, especially in the prelude and the prologue. So I'm definitely like, I feel like you guys are like my crutch as I go through this. Otherwise, I would have missed a lot of those things, and I'm sure I'm sure I'm still missing a lot of things.
There's a prediction. Woo.
Elokar is the destroyer and Callan is the redeemer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Callan, the
Elokar.
redeemer.
Oh, so Michael, well, I guess this could be for anyone, but at the last live stream, someone mentioned typos and you said, oh, I'll have to I think you mentioned them, that you found a typo, and someone else said, oh, there's lots, and you joked about having to keep an eye out for any. Did you find any more?
I have not. Okay, so in the, I'll have to admit some of my own laziness here. I had the idea that when I was making my micro breakdown videos, or whatever you want to call my videos, that I was like, I should show you my notes for the prelude section because they're pretty much as long as the prelude. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to do this for every chapter, and then I'll combine some stuff and make videos. And it took me so long to make my notes that I actually, for the read along so far, I feel bad. I've only actually looked at like the first 3 or 4 chapters. But I also am on my second read through of the series.
Right.
And I'm not that much ahead. I mean, I'm probably a couple hundred pages ahead. So I haven't noticed anything else, but also I haven't been rereading that section. I've been continuing to read the section that I was already rereading with my wife a little bit. But I am planning on going back and actually trying to read through this. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like with a book series this large, there has to be tons of typos. I don't know. Maybe that's an insult to the professional publishing world.
Well, I can imagine a book this huge, like our manuscript like that. Like, how long does that take to edit?
Mm-hmm.
Like all the phases of editing. Like, there's like at least 4 phases of editing that has to go.
Yeah.
And I just can't.
Well,
Like,
think about this. I'm sorry if I said this in the last live stream. I sometimes have trouble remembering what I say when I have 2 little kids. But you think the book comes out November 17th, I think. Currently on Brandon Sanderson's website, his progress bars, he has 4th draft finished, just come up a few weeks ago, and 5th draft is still at 0%. You got to figure if you're working backwards, you probably need at least a month to like get everything shipped to stores and everything, and at least another month for printing and everything, and then another month or so for proofreading and all that and editing. And maybe longer. I'm not in the professional publishing world, but he's like. He has to be done with
You're saying it's cutting it close, right?
He's cutting it close, yeah.
yeah.
It's like for the very first Hobbit movie, they were rendering out the final effect shots like 2 hours before the world premiere.
Dang.
Okay, so I have a question, it's a minor thing, but it kind of bugged me. I don't know if this is just an inconsistency or if there's a reason that either is or is not explained. I don't know. But so far, when people talk about age and stuff, they use the word years. The word years is used several times in reference to how old someone is. But then there's also like 2 or 3 times where someone mentions like 6 weepings or 10 weepings or what, like in reference to their development. And it's like, I guess I got a little confused. It's like, wait, is that the same thing and they're being more official, or is that a different?
I have 2 answers. Do you want the super nerdy one or just the real? I'll give both. Weepings, I think, if I remember correctly, signify their new year. So it's just another way of saying both. But I want to say, because I've been talking to some like actual crazy Cosmere nerds, that there is one of the Arcanum Unbound, if that's how you say that, like side stories actually has a lot more of the science related to it. It actually goes into the relative size of our Earth to their Earth. So you find out that their years are actually, let's see, how does this make sense? Their years are longer. Their years are slightly different than ours, so that the characters' ages in our world is different than the characters' ages in their world by like a factor of 1.2. So it doesn't actually matter, but it's different.
Interesting. Which I guess makes sense since Sanderson has all these different planets. Like it would make sense that not all of them would have a 365-degree cycle.
Yeah. Sanderson wrote the prologue for his rereaders.
I was actually thinking weepings were like literal, like maybe like some kind of moment in their life, and they weeped, and they were weeping, and it's like a turning point in their life, and that's like your.
Calvin's got a lot of those at this point. Then
I know, right? Calvin's old then.
Rich mentions that weepings are explained. I'm pretty sure they're related to years. I think.
Okay.
For some reason, it's striking in my head that, and maybe that's because I was further along when reading it. So Reader Born saying weepings are the halfway point.
Oh.
I'm having a hard time.
So Calvin being 19, Kristen, do math.
I want to say that I read on Reddit that Kaladin's like 23 our years.
Okay.
Oh, I thought he was like 1 year older than Earth years.
I don't, I'm sure that if you look online, you could probably get more than one answer.
Probably.
Yeah, I thought that the weepings were yearly, which is what Biblical says. But I think that I'm basing that on one of the flashback sequences that comes past the halfway point of this book. So maybe that counts as spoilers, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
So we will find out in some way or another.
Yeah, Rich. Well, they don't get into the details in the weepings. They're kind of a spoiler. Yeah.
Okay.
A storm called the Weepings. Interesting.
Okay. Wow, we still have like 28 people watching, which is amazing. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Aww.
We love you all.
Yes, thank you.
But we should probably get going and get us Californians our dinner. Everybody else their sleep, probably.
Yeah, put those East Coasters to bed.
Yes. But again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, co-hosts. I love you guys, and you're all amazing. And
thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
Yes, thank you, Christy, for putting this together, and thank you, 28 people who are watching. Everyone else who still watched.
All right, let's see here. There we go. All righty, and don't forget to check out my co-host channels and the playlist down below of Michael's and Ryan's Stormlight playlist. They have a bunch of videos on it, so do check those out, guys, and we'll see you. Dang, I should have had the date in front of me.
It's 2 weeks, right?
July 2nd. July 2nd.
Yeah.
July 2nd, thank you. And do you happen to know what chapter we'll need?
33?
Yeah, 33.
You guys are awesome. Thank you. Alrighty, guys. Well, we'll talk to you guys soon, and thank you again for showing up.
See you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.